I live in the downtown area of a pretty major city. My street is relatively quiet, but I can't say so much for the surrounding neighborhoods. My city as a whole is infamous for drug activity and gun violence. We also have an increasing number of homeless people as our shelters have almost all closed down. I've generally never minded, shit happens, and I didn't grow up in the best of circumstances either. I would never stereotype anyone based on their housing status, and I was even involved with a homeless outreach program at the time. I left and never went back after this, and I've been hesitant to help anyone since. It's 10 o'clock or so at night, and I'm headed to my partner's parents' house about 30 minutes away from my own. I get about 2 blocks away before remembering I need gas. I'm not too fond of the idea of stopping at a gas station near my apartment at this time of night, but I wasn't going to make it all the way out to the suburbs. I pull into one in a not so great part of the neighborhood, but it was brightly lit and there were a couple of people walking by, so I didn't think much of it. I get my gas and go in to grab a couple of snacks. When I came back out, a tall man in a black coat and brown beanie started casually chatting to me. I couldn't tell if he was 25 or 40. His voice is so low that I can barely make out what he's saying. It was something about being a music producer and working on a new project. He seems friendly enough, while maybe a little erratic, so I let him ramble for a few minutes before politely telling him I needed to get going. He told me his name was Mac. I unlock my door to get in the car, and this fucker gets in the passenger seat with me. At this point, he is no longer a friendly, chatty stranger. I am fucking terrified. His demeanor hasn't changed though, and he's acting like this is the most normal thing in the world. While I've had more than my fair share of encounters with creeps, nothing like this has ever happened to me before. I don't scream, I don't tell him to fuck off, I just sit there in fear of what he'd do to me if I resisted.
I need money for my son,
he says.
He's in the hospital with a gunshot wound. His mum's waiting for me.
I know this story is bullshit, but I want him out of my car. I give him what little I have in my wallet and I tell him I need to get going. He has the nerve to ask,
"Can you drive me to my friend's house? It's right up the road."
What? Isn't he supposed to be going to the hospital for his son? I try to decline as politely as I possibly can. I tell him my boyfriend is waiting for me, and this opens the floodgates to a bunch of questions. Personal questions about my sex life, what my boyfriend and I are going to do when I get there, and extremely gross, unsolicited comments about my body. I have tried to block out his exact words to me, but it was incredibly gross. I was sure that this was it, that this was the end. I'm sitting there trapped in my own car. The gas station parking lot is empty. I can't call the police. I wish I could tell you I had some genius idea that helped me to get myself out of this, but I didn't. I'm panicked and frozen, and I finally agree to take him to where he supposedly wants to go. He has me drive around this neighborhood, winding through dark side streets with a lot of seemingly abandoned houses for what feels like forever. He finally had me stop in the parking lot of a beauty salon where his friend supposedly works and is going to get a ride with her to the hospital. The parking lot is on a busy street and brightly lit. If he's going to kill me, he picked a terrible place to do it. He was all over the place and talked rapidly. Little details of his story keep changing constantly, and he is clearly high as a kite, probably mentally unstable as well. All the while, he continues to act like we were long-term friends and nothing about this was terrifying. He keeps telling me he would give anything to trade places with my boyfriend. Ugh, gross. I keep gently reminding him I need to be leaving, and he keeps telling me to stay because this friend will give me money to pay me back for helping his son out. I wonder why she couldn't have just given him the money directly if that was the case. I ask him what's taking his friend so long. He says he doesn't know.
"Can I use your phone to call her?"
I want to say no. maybe this is all an elaborate ploy to steal my phone and take off. I'm still thinking he could be a murderer though, so I reluctantly hand him my phone. I should have dialed the number for him. He was taking a long time to dial while I was looking away, and then... Jesus fuck. All of a sudden, he's looking up porn and jacking off right in front of me. I wish I had a way to prove this, because I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's true. The image is burned into my mind even now. I should have seen that one coming, I guess. At this point, I lose my cool and tell him to get the fuck out. I'm done. He starts crying, wailing, I don't know what to call it.
You're just so hot. I hated thinking about you with another man. You just turn me on so much.
I'm just staring at him. Okay, too bad. You need to go now. He straightens up with a big smile on his face all of a sudden and says,
I'm just fucking with you. I'm not a pussy, so I wouldn't cry like that. Are you sure you don't want to take me to...
completely different location? Yes, I am fucking sure. I told him my boyfriend was probably worried about me as an hour had gone by at this point. Somehow that got his attention and he finally got out and left. I drove to my partner's house shaking. He and I had just started dating at this point, and I didn't want him to think I was stupid or something, so I just nonchalantly told him I was dealing with a creep at the gas station and it took me a while. Much later, I told him the real story and he was appropriately horrified. I wish I could say it stopped there, but I started getting calls from all kinds of local numbers for the next couple of weeks. Only one voicemail was left, and it was a lot of breathing and very faint words I couldn't make out. I'm creeped out, but I try to dismiss it as paranoia. One time I actually answered. Hello?
Hey, it's Mac. I have your money.
I feel like I need to throw up. I don't need it, I say. Leave me alone. I hang up as he starts rambling about how beautiful I am and how he wants to see me again. I block every strange number that's been calling me and the calls finally stop. I can't imagine how he got my number. My only thought is that when he opened my phone to call his friend, he looked at my contacts. My own number is displayed at the top. You may wonder why I never called the police. My city is extremely well known for its police using excessive force, especially in the downtown area. People are regularly killed by police here. I've personally witnessed people be beaten up by cops for minor infractions. I do not intend to make any kind of political statement or express my opinions here, but I genuinely feel I would have been putting myself in further danger by calling the police, even after this was all over. Best case scenario, nothing would have been done and I would have been chewed out by the cops for being stupid enough to let this man into my car. Worst case, they shoot him and I have to live with that forever. I've regretted that ever since though, because a friend of mine later had an encounter with him. This was on the complete opposite side of the city and he gave her the same story as me about his son being in the hospital. She ended up driving him around aimlessly for an hour too, before also screaming at him to get the fuck out. So, Mac, you're welcome, but let's never fucking meet ever again. A little over a year ago, I had a job working overnight at a gas station close to my house. I'm a woman and I was 31 at the time. I know that to some it seems unsafe for a woman to work graveyard shift by herself. However, it was a slow store and the sheriff's office was about 20 feet across from it. I really didn't think I would have that many problems. There would be about 30 customers in an 8-hour shift and that was on a busier night. It was about 3:30 in the morning. I went outside to sweep the parking lot and last minute check the trash. It was time for a cigarette, and I had one headphone in, kinda jamming out. Across the road in the parking lot of the sheriff's office, I saw a figure with his back to me. He was swaying back and forth while looking down. Honestly, it looked like he was enjoying a much-needed piss. Against the sheriff's office, though? Yeah, the building closed at 4 PM and didn't open it again till 6 the next morning, but why? By the back of his ripped white t-shirt, I remembered that he had come in about 4 hours earlier. He was a total creep, and I could already tell he had a good buzz going. I didn't say anything. I just took my eyes off of him and tried not to draw attention to myself. It was working until a car pulled in. I was still outside as they pulled up. I saw him look at the car and then at me, and back and forth again. As the customer was leaving, I walked her outside. I still had half a smoke burning, and I'd left my dustpan outside with the squeegee. We both heard him start to swear angrily and seemingly engage in an argument with himself. She looked across the road and told me to be careful. I made an awkward joke about him being the one that should be more afraid of me or something like that. The man was still there, but closer to the road, now facing the parking lot of my store. Whatever he's yelling was completely unintelligible. He was obviously very drunk and he could barely stand straight. He was still swaying away. I didn't engage him, but I didn't take my eyes off of him this time. I just slowly walked back into the store. Something about his face really bothered me. It had a darkness to it, but his eyes looked wild. My experience during graveyard jobs has been that the crazy-eyed ones are the worst. I didn't like it at all, and I wanted no part of it. I still had almost 3 hours to go on my shift, and 2 before any other employees got there. Instantly, I went to the computer and typed up a temporarily closed sign just in case he wanted trouble. I was coming around the counter on my way to the doors when I saw that he'd walked across the road to my side now. I literally just barely got the second door locked when he stumbled into our very small parking lot. My hand mimed the hand signal for cut across my neck, basically saying, "Nope, sorry, you can't come in here, we're closed." I shook my head back and forth too, hoping to further discourage him. He started walking away, but screamed something at me while he's walking. I don't mean he was grumpy and shouted at me or yelled that I was an asshole or anything like that. I mean, like, he was at an enraged volume and was violently throwing his hands everywhere. Definitely knowing I'm in the wrong shift of the wrong job, I got really skeeved out. I decided to call the cops. It's a good thing that I did too, because the minute I hung up with them, there he comes again up to the door. He starts pulling and banging on it. He backs up and runs into it trying to ram it, not that it would have done any good. I made the mistake of telling him that I had called the cops. I say I made the mistake of telling him because once I said that, he took off. The police never found him. They drove around the road and surrounding neighborhoods for over an hour but found no one. He was on foot, so I don't get where he could have gone to. He didn't harm me, and with them not finding him, I didn't fill out a police report or anything. I was safe behind thick glass doors that were locked for the rest of my shift. It just sucked. Maybe if I didn't warn him ahead of time, I wouldn't have had to spend the last 3 months of my job constantly looking over my shoulder. I'll never know what the right choice was. I'm just glad I don't work there anymore. Maybe it's just me, but this really freaked me out. I had just started working graveyard at the gas station close to my house. I believe it was my 6th shift overall, but the 4th one being alone. It was just after 11 o'clock and this man came in. He was about 40 and had the dumbest haircut I had ever seen. Think fucked up bowl cut. Anyway, he asked me if I had change for 100. I told him I'm sorry, but I'm not allowed to take it, and even if I was, I didn't have the change. The company's third shift policy was that we were not to take $50 or $100 bills, period. Well, he got upset and started complaining. He started trying to talk me into getting change from the safe. I apologized and again said that I couldn't. I tried my best to continue on to the elderly customer waiting behind him. He called out to his friend to ask if he had anything smaller. The kind lady I was waiting on asked me to hold her bag while she used the restroom. Bowcut's friend comes in and I immediately see that he's on drugs. Now, I try not to judge people, but it was really obvious. Like, his face was covered in sores. He kept touching at them and he kept bouncing in place on his toes. Like some kind of tweaker prizefighter. The friend started asking me questions.
Hey sweetheart, how you doing? Are you always here by yourself? Do they let you have weapons behind the counter? If they do you carry one with you to work? I always carry a gun. How much money do they allow you to carry in the drawers? Do you still have to do safe drops even though business was so slow?
Each question that he asked made me slightly more uncomfortable. I'm kind of a mouthy woman and I don't always use my head before I speak. Finally, I interrupted him. Look, are you planning on robbing me? Because if you are, then stop wasting time. I don't have time for this and I need to get back to work. His hands fly up and he started sputtering.
Whoa, rob you? What the fuck? I was just trying to make conversation, what's wrong with you?
I answered with, well, your conversation skills could really use some work then. You don't ask a woman working alone overnight those types of questions. So the real question is, what is wrong with you? I saw now that Bowcut had pulled the car horizontally across the parking spaces closest to the door. Upon seeing this, I was just beyond done at this point. I told him to leave the store and not to ever come back during my shift or I'd call the cops. He left. The poor woman who had gone to the bathroom had heard some of the exchange. She came up to me before leaving the store and asked if I was alright. I told her that I was and I thanked her. Just a weird customer that gave me a weird feeling. He only came back once after that. I was in the cooler and I could hear him yelling at the manager about not being allowed in the store. The manager told him that he listened to the audio and would have done the same thing that I did. I know what some could possibly be thinking, that I was overly defensive and dramatic. He was probably asking about the money because I couldn't exchange his friend's 100. But what about the other questions he asked?